This is Ken Hance, best storyteller in Texas. Saying of the day, Margaret Thatcher, one of my favorite of all time. She said, socialism works fine until you run out of other people's money. And our program's going to be a lot about that today. But before I start the program, I want to say a special tribute to a federal judge, Rob Junell. What a great guy. He was a federal judge in Midland. He was a student of mine at Texas Tech. And I spoke at his swearing-in ceremony, investiture ceremony, and I said, if I'd known he was going to be a federal judge, I'd have given him a better grade. He was a great guy and one of the most competitive persons I've ever been around. He was the meanest 180-pound linebacker that ever played for Texas Tech. And in 1967 or 68 in Lubbock, he was starting linebacker. Tech kicked off and it went into the end zone, so UT got the ball at the 20-yard line. And after 3 plays, it was 4th and 12. He had gotten all 3 tackles. He later got elected state representative and was chairman of appropriations, did a great job. If you went in asking for money, you better be able to justify it. And he held on the purse strings of the state just like it's his own money. But federal judge Rob Junell was a true patriot and a great American, and God blessed his soul. We had the funeral Friday in Midland. And Honorable Pete Laney had a chance to speak about his days, and a friend of mine, Vic Choate, also talked, and he was going to make some example by juggling tennis balls, and it didn't go as well as planned, but everybody got a good laugh out of it. Today we're going to talk about, you're talking about socialism. Zohran Mamdani got elected mayor of New York City and ran as a socialist. Some professors from New York University have gone through and looked at all that he promised. In looking at the study by the professors at NYU, he was going to freeze the stabilization rates on rent. Now, there's a stabilization rent board, and if you raise rents, you've got to go in and justify it. And that the average landlord makes about $600 on the rent that they're charging, and a lot of them hadn't had a raise in years. And the amount of vacancies is about 1.5%, where in most healthy cities it's about 5%. And so there's a supply and demand. But with the rent stabilization board, people have been reluctant to build new apartments. They just don't build them. So he's going to make a bad situation worse, and that's not going to work. He also came out for free buses. Everybody can ride the bus free. It cost on that is going to be about $640-something million loss of revenue, and that they'll make it up some other way, he says. But what's going to happen, these professors believe that the homeless and the drug addicts are going to start living on the buses, because it's free and they can get on there and just say they're going to the next stop or whatever. So they get free buses and freeze the stabilization rents, and that they're going to have supermarkets that'll be owned by the city. They're going to have a supermarket in every borough, and it'll be owned by the city and run by the city. And, in Russia, that really worked well. They just didn't have any groceries on the shelf. You go in there and the price is low. There was a guy one time told me a story about he went in a little grocery store, and guys had bananas were 3 for $1. He told me, he said, down the street, you get 5 for $1. He said, we'll go buy them there. He said, I would, but they're out. This guy said, when I'm out, I sell them 6 for $1. You got to face reality. Also, he put in free daycare, which will cost a lot of money. And then he came up with a plan of building 500,000 affordable houses and apartments. But he's only going to do it with union workers, which will make it cost about twice as much. But to pay for it, he's going to put a new tax on the top 1% of around 2%. So most of the top 1% now in New York are paying almost 15% income tax to state and the city. And you take that with the 36 to 40% with the federal government, you're having a people that are going to be paying 55 to 57% of their income and their earnings will go to governmental entities. And the professor said of all the ideas he had, the worst one is the tax issue, because the people that are earning money and providing jobs, they'll move. They're not going to pay 14% when they move to Florida or Texas or Wyoming, not pay anything. When Ed Whitaker took over of Southwestern Bell, he moved it from St. Louis to San Antonio. And automatically, all the employees that had to make the move, they got a pay increase because there wasn't a state income tax in the state of Texas. Housing now, the average is about $3,900 a month for a two-bedroom apartment. People that pay 30% of their income, half the people pay 30% of their income. If they're making $100,000, they'll pay 30% of that on their rent. And there's a fourth of them pay 50% of what they make. For making $100,000, they pay 50 on the rent. And that Professor Mark Willis at NYU just said, we need more housing. And the problem's been is they've had this stabilization of holding rents down, so there's no supply and demand. So they've had that, and he's going to make it worse. And he'll be over there asking for the federal government to help him out and everything like that. And, the governor, Pritzker of Illinois, had been very critical of troops coming in and National Guard sent in by President Trump. And he says, we don't need troops. This is not a problem. Crime's not a problem. We've got it under control. But what we'd like for you to do is send in more money that we can hire policemen. So if you don't need troops, well, then why are you going to hire more policemen? And, they ran on a basis of, cutting the budget of the policemen. And now they're, saying, well, something went wrong. And crime's up. And they claim that crime's down in Chicago, but they're still averaging over one a day getting murdered. And they're complaining about additional help from law enforcement. Going back to New York, Mamdani, the governor of New York, said, we're not going to do that. So I don't know what happens. The funny thing about it, people made homemade boats in Cuba to escape communism and socialism, and in a homemade boat went 90 miles trying to get away from it, and that's how bad it is. I think that this is an experiment that will not go well, but it tells you how bad living conditions are and making a living and trying to live in New York, that the cost of living has gone up. You can't find housing. And so there's a crisis. And I think the public just came along and he promised things. And I don't think they thought that he could do it, but that he might do something. And they just voted for him. It was a strange deal, to say the least, and will not have a happy ending, in my opinion. And as the professor said, the worst thing he's proposed is raising the tax, and they're overtaxed as it is. We had some other things come up today, and one was on stupid criminals. There was a lady got stopped. she was doing 107 in Florida. Her excuse was, police officer, where are you going? What's the hurry? Something like that. And it was almost midnight, and Little Caesars was closing at midnight, and she had to get there and get her pizza. And she's doing 107. I'm not going to drive 107, but if I did, it wouldn't be because I was late getting some pizza. That was a little unusual. Also in Florida, they had some kid, 17-year-old kid, got on a golf course and did donuts in the car, and his parents had to pay $160,000. He's 17. I put him under the stupid criminals as well. There's a study that shows that 1 in 6 parents think that their child may be a pro athlete someday, like in the NFL, the NBA. And I think back when I was chancellor, somebody would call me about a player, and I'd always send them over to Tommy McVeigh. And I had a woman call me from Houston I knew, and she's talking about her grandson, and that he was a middle linebacker in high school in Houston and had made second team all district, and that he wanted to go to Tech, and he was 6'3" and weighed 240. So I told McVeigh, and I always told the coaches, do whatever you want to do. I'm just passing this along. And so McVeigh called me. They invited the kid up to visit, and he called me the week after the kid was here. And he said something happened to him on the plane, because when he got off the plane, he was 5'11", weighed about 180. His grandmother thought he was 6'3" and weighed 240, but he shrunk a little on that flight from Houston to Lubbock. In the same survey, 25% of the population thinks that we're not having enough children, and that we're not replacing the number as fast as we used to. In Canada, Toronto, a guy stole a bus and drove it on its regular route for 5 hours before they ever stopped him. And they said he did a pretty good job, They were thinking about maybe hiring him. And, that's an unusual story. And out of Pennsylvania, this is one of my favorites. A guy was cleaning his gun and had his dog in there with him, and the dog stepped on the trigger and it shot the guy. So you always said a big headline would be man bites dog, or this would be a big headline, dog shoots man. There is a guy by the name of Bud Brigham, great guy, great American, very good businessman. He is in the process of hauling frack material, frack oil wells, from over by Kermit over in New Mexico. And he's got a belt line, a conveyor belt that goes 42 miles. You give someone a challenge and an idea, and they'll come up with a solution. And just one part of the belt is 16 miles long without anything in between it. So I'm impressed with that. And I saw that, and also a story in Australia. They had the longest train ever, and it was 4.6 miles long. And they took it 171 miles. I think that train, I met it one time, it was crossing the road over in Clovis. NFL came out 2 weeks ago. The Texans beat the Jags 36-29, and it was the first time that score had happened since the NFL started. They've got records on this. Since the NFL started, they've got 1,094 scores, and it's the first time they'd ever had one that was 36-29. And the most common scores in the NFL is 20-17. They've had that happen 298 times. So I guess they'll keep the records on anything, but I would never guess that. Also, last week, U.S. Penny has stopped making them. They're not going to make any more pennies. Pennies were 100% copper until 1982. They switched over to 97.5 zinc, and then 2.5% copper. nickels are now costing 13.8 cents to make a nickel. So I wonder if nickels, they're going to round up or round down, and I would think most of them try to round up. There are places like I know the airport in Austin for several years, they don't take any cash or change. You you got to have a credit card or you can't buy anything. The government's getting more that way. I still like that, you can carry cash, or as my Uncle Scooter used to call it, walking around money. And that he always had a little walking around money, and so in case something went bad, he'd have something to get home with. One other thing that I wanted to mention that has happened this time of year is always a tough time for me because with the clock, we fall back. And so it's dark by the time I start to go home, and the traffic slows down. I'm telling you, the traffic in any city is a lot slower because it's dark, and everybody used to driving in the light, and so they make adjustments, and that's you know it's an adjustment not only to your driving, but I think to your attitude. That some people, there's a reason there are more suicides in Alaska in the winters because the winter's so long, and that so it does make a change. Every year somebody's talking about going back and not having daylight savings, but they never pass a bill to do it. One last survey that I saw talked about what is the most despicable profession, or people have. You're more of a villain if you have. Number one was criminal defense lawyers, and I would have guessed that one. I would have thought maybe politicians would beat them out, but not. And people don't necessarily want a criminal defense lawyer. Now, if they got in trouble, they would really want one. No matter what the situation is, somebody's entitled to know what their rights are. But that was number one. And social workers were number two. Obama was a social worker, and it didn't hurt him. The third one that I couldn't understand was dentist. I've always liked my dentist. And I guess some people get to thinking of the pain and everything, and they just put dentist on the list. And customer service reps. Those are the people you have to talk to, and every once in a while you get one that speaks English. And that you're explaining to them what's going wrong with your computer, and they don't understand you, and you don't understand them, and it can be a frustrating. I can see that. Fourth one, I just couldn't believe they had teachers on that survey, but also on the most revered professions, teachers were, at the top. So I guess the people that got bad teachers put them in the villain list, and people got good teachers. I had great teachers in school, and I can still name all my teachers, different ones and different things they said. Mr. Newman taught us English, and he always said, it's better to have loved and lost than never loved at all. And the other thing, we would ask him some question about an exam that he just passed out to us. And he'd say, the first sign of intelligence is the ability to follow simple instructions. In other words, the instructions are on the page. Read it. And I don't know why number 6 said plastic surgeons. A large part of their work is helping people that have been injured and have injuries because of wrecks or whatever. And 7 was tax collectors. I understand that. 8 was sanitation workers. 9 was human resource workers. And too many people have to go to the HR department to find out what they've got or what's going on. So I guess that's different ones. But parking enforcements, that was one that, and nobody likes to get a parking ticket. And so, that was one that they had. Another one, like the teachers, that was at this list, and also top of the good list, was farmers. Now, I've always thought they had a good, people thought a lot of them, but on this list, it had them lower. But on other lists, it has them when you're selecting the best And farmers rank real high. So that one's, and journalists, I can see that one, that they would be low, and I would see also that they could be high on the list. And real estate agents was another one. But no matter what kind of survey you run, you can get all kinds of answers. This is Ken Hance, best storyteller in Texas, winding it up. And saying of the day was Margaret Thatcher, and she said, socialism works fine till you run out of other people's money. And that's what's going to happen in New York City. Have a good week.